wanna sex you up. Make that the intro.
If you don't say make that the intro, it's got a much better chance of me making it the intro.
Damn it.
What? Did we just become best friends? Yeah!
One is a t-shirt queen, and the other is an SEO and web developing ninja. And both of these squirrels are a little nuts. You're now listening to the More Gooder Ideas podcast, a show for the small business hustlers worldwide, encouraging you to be your most authentic self. This is the place where your whole story matters. Come for the tips and stay for the fun. Now, your hosts, Angie Patterson and Jay Smith.
We had this crazy idea a couple weeks ago that maybe be fun to talk about small businesses that from the world of fiction.
Yeah.
And, we came up with several ideas, and I think we've got a lot of episodes to talk about, some really creative ones, but one that had a big impact on me back in my early days, the first attempt at college, was New Jack City.
Throwback.
Yeah, the Cash Money Brothers. So people from my generation, and I think your generation, will probably be pretty familiar with Nino Brown and the Cash Money Brothers and New Jack City. Younger generations, maybe not so much. I don't hear a lot about that movie in kind of the popular culture realms, but I have a feeling that if it had a big anniversary or something like that and people started watching it again, it would really have a big following. What was it, 1991?
1991.
Okay. All right. And so what are your initial thoughts on, and of course, because this is a small business podcast, we are specifically talking about the Cash Money Brothers, which is the gang, for lack of a better term, that is the focus of the crack epidemic.
An enterprise, if you will.
An enterprise, yes. A small business that grows from very humble beginnings with a group of friends and turns into quite an enterprise in the city, which is essentially New York City, but it's not specifically called out.
I think it was based on Detroit.
Oh, was it?
I believe so.
Okay. All right.
Don't come at me, Wesley, if I'm incorrect.
I don't think he wrote it, but I think it was actually Mario Van Peebles was the director, I believe. Wesley Snipes was the main star. Some points of note for that movie. It did have a couple of pretty cool cameos. Fab Five Freddy from Yo MTV Raps. Again, look it up, kids. Flavor Flav.
Oh,
was
yeah.
in a few episodes or a few spots. Color Me Bad.
Oh.
Got their big hit. I Want to Sex You Up was from that movie.
I wanna sex you up. Make that the intro.
If you don't say make that the intro, it's got a much better chance of me making it the intro.
Damn it.
I mean, you're welcome to continue singing the entire.
I'm still learning, Jay. Okay. Podcasting is a learning process for me.
A couple other musical groups, Guy and Troop, were in that movie. Troop were the guys, I believe, singing around the garbage can. Guy was in the New Year's Eve episode.
Okay, the ones that they turn into crackheads like throughout the movie. Isn't that kind of how it progressed?
Mm-mm.
That's how I interpreted it.
That did not happen.
Okay.
But cool. Guy, and not a lot of people are familiar with Guy. They had a big moment back in the late 80s, early 90s. But Teddy Riley, who was the lead man, ended up with Rex and Effect of Rump Shaker fame and Blackstreet of No Diggity fame. So, yeah.
You didn't mention Keith Sweat.
Keith Sweat was it? That's right. Sang at the wedding.
An
That's
American
right.
treasure.
Yes, sang at the wedding. That's right. The wedding that eventually got shot up by the Italian mafia.
The most prolific scene in the movie. I have some thoughts on that.
Okay.
Scene.
So let's get into it. What are your initial thoughts?
Well, I hadn't seen it in a long time when you brought it up. I had seen it before. I was 2 years old.
Oh, wow.
In 1991. I turned 3 at the end of 1991. So I've seen it before, but I did watch it again. And it really is the perfect example of what like 90s crime action movies were like. Like if you watch it now compared to movies now, there's a lot of humor in it. So I felt like it was a great first choice for our podcast because we do try to keep it light. and fun, even though the points that it's trying to make are not necessarily fun or funny. But some of the campiness of it
Sure.
is really entertaining. But I was kind of nervous that I wouldn't be able to like pick up what you were dropping as far as like bringing it into the business realm, but I actually did. When I watched it from that point of view, I saw a lot more things than I thought I would.
That's what I was hoping to do with this is look at fictional businesses kind of with an eye of it as a small business, because although in our businesses we don't have these wacky things happen for the most part like they do in shows to keep it entertaining, we have challenges just like they do. We have wins just like they do. So I thought it'd be kind of cool. And it also, if I'm going to sit here and talk about web design, or you're going to talk about t-shirt design, that only resonates really, there's some things we talk about that are universal with other small business owners. But when we've all collectively seen kind of the same movies and TV shows and cartoons, and we all understand what Moe's Tavern is, then we can talk about that and people go, oh yeah, that makes sense. So, yeah, that's why.
And I like pop culture, so I was excited to do this, especially for something that, like you said, is kind of a throwback. Maybe you haven't thought about in a while or seen in a while.
Yeah, and I guarantee you, if you're of my age and you hear this podcast, you're definitely gonna want to go watch it again, because it still holds up. It's still a badass movie. Ice-T was in it, as we mentioned several times. Wesley Snipes, Chris Rock, I believe that was his first hurrah. Judd Nelson. The only other Judd Nelson movie you can name other than Breakfast Club.
Oh, Judd.
I'm sure he's been in other movies, but that's the only one I knew that was Judd Nelson. And that was his character. Honestly, it was almost like the same character from Breakfast Club. Had grown up a little bit, become a really, really nasty cop. And now he's,
Ice-T had to have a sidekick. So they were like, I guess Judd Nelson.
Right. And Vanessa Williams, Wesley Snipes' wife in the movie.
I made a list.
Okay.
If we want to just kick right into
let's
it
get
here.
right into it. We've been babbling for 10 minutes.
So I looked at it from, what is Nino doing right?
Okay.
Selling crack, maybe not right. Killing people, maybe not right. But what is he doing right that could apply to your small business?
And just for clarification, if you haven't seen, Nino Brown is Wesley Snipes' character, the main character and the leader of the Cash Money Brothers.
Some of the things that I thought Nino Brown was doing correctly and the Cash Money Brothers is they really embrace their look and their vibe.
Okay.
They coordinate outfits
They
a
do.
lot of times.
That's right. They do.
Which I love.
That reminds me of when they're handing out turkeys during the holidays. They're all wearing black and gold, like doorman jackets. They have the epaulets and all that.
Yes, there's a scene where they're having a meeting and they all have like black suits with the gold chains, and then at the wedding they're wearing white or cream, and so I love that.
Yeah.
But it's something that we've talked about a lot when it comes to your small business. Is you have a brand. Mm-hmm. You are the brand a lot of times with your small business, and they really embraced that in that movie.
Okay.
You knew if they were in that group or not.
Well, and to take it further, their soldiers all wore black bomber jackets that had a red CMB on the back and a black cap that said CMB on it.
Branded.
Yeah.
Everything was branded.
Yeah, that's right.
And even Nino, he has a very specific haircut. Mm-hmm. Like nobody else has that haircut in the movie. Sure. Maybe nobody else ever had that haircut that he has in that movie. And that resonated with me because, especially for my small business, I am the brand.
Okay.
So that I thought was really smart of him.
Okay.
You see him on the street, it's Cash Money Brothers.
My first note is diversification.
Oh.
Not only were they running drugs and killing people, they also owned a nightclub called the Spotlight.
Okay.
That on the 2 or 3 scenes in the movie seemed to be a banging spot. Like Flavor Flav was the MC. Guy was performing there. There was tons of people dancing. Ice-T was hanging out there, although he was there as an undercover cop. Ice-T's still at your club. That's pretty dope. I'm just saying.
Breaking the third wall.
That's right. I don't care. Ice-T's in my club. He can be whatever he wants.
Yeah, we love you too, Ice-T.
Oh, hell yeah. But I don't think it's... it's not specifically called out in the movie as in a lot of other mafia gang type movies. Their front operation, which is often a club or a restaurant, it's almost its own character, much like in The Sopranos, which I think we'll talk about later on down the road. But in this movie, it's not really called out as much. But several scenes do take place at the Spotlight, and even when they run afoul of Don Armateo, which is the Italian mafia, he mentions, we gave you the Spotlight. So that's, kind of we helped you start out. But I thought that was kind of cool where they're diversified, because it's not just, an empty club that they use as a front or a money laundering operation. That place is banging.
Yeah.
So they're running a full legit business aside from their main business.
Oh, I think that's a great point, though, because I, as a t-shirt or product base just in general, you can't rely on one thing. So I think that's really a great point.
I mean, and they have to hang out somewhere.
Yeah.
Want to have somewhere cool. I mean, go to the batting cages or something. We've got a nightclub.
Yeah. Well, and then they acquire an apartment building, which is a huge...
Acquire is a nice word, but yes. The Carter. We'll get to the Carter.
So my next thing that I wrote down, again, another more gooder ideas motif, is surround yourself with your tribe. If you come in talking crazy to Nino Brown like that old guy, you got to go.
Mm-hmm. You're speaking of his inner circle, Keisha, who was a badass, the Dutta Man, the muscle, G Money, who ended up kind of being his Yago, who kind of took it down. But we'll get around to that. So yeah, and then Kareem, who was Vanessa Williams', I think, cousin, who ended up being the banker and the computer guy. He was kind of a side character, but yeah, you're right. And in the beginning of the movie, Wesley Snipes kind of gives a real quick he's giving the backstory, talking about them hustling on the street corner and, playing ball and all that as kids. So these kids, they came up together. And when they grow and they continue to grow, they kind of keep that around.
Loyalty.
Yeah. Loyalty, which starts to fracture towards the end, as often many of these crime movies start to happen.
But ignore that part. He has his tribe of people that are about the same thing he's about, and those are the people he keeps around him at all times.
Sure, yeah, till they start dying. But yeah,
or betraying him, and then he kills them. But
right. Speaking of the Carter, which is the hotel that they end up taking over and creating this terrifying crack fortress out of. When he's laying out the plans, he makes a statement: change the product, you change the marketing strategy. That's a Nino Brown quote. So when they moved from just selling, I believe it was cocaine, weed, and decided to move into freebase crack cocaine, Nino had the master plan to take over an entire apartment building and make it their base of operations, out of which they sell the drugs and people can use them there. And all of the residents are basically hostages.
And they produce it there as well,
Yes.
I believe.
Yeah. Yep. They package it all up after they get it from the Peruvians. But all their computers, all their it's their entire base of operations. But his quote after, I think it was Kareem said, "You're not going to take over the Carter." He said, "Yeah, we're taking over the Carter." And he said, "You change the product, you change the marketing strategy." I was like, "Hey, that's pretty good. That's pretty good." Yeah. I mean, yeah, if you roll out a new product, what was working for you yesterday may not work for you today. So you have to revisit what you're doing. So, yeah, I like that one.
That brings me to one of my points.
Okay.
Which is dream big. There's nothing wrong with setting your eyes to the sky. And that's exactly what he did.
Oh, yeah.
He said, we're going to run this whole town.
Yes.
We're going to take over this whole complex. We're going to take over this whole market. And if you watch the movie, you'll see how that worked out for him. But there's nothing wrong with, what's the old saying? If you shoot for the stars, you'll fall in the clouds.
Something like that, yeah.
You know, I mean, I think a big mistake that people make, I made, is thinking, oh, this probably isn't going to go anywhere. I just think people, especially when you start a small business, there's so much apprehension of like not failing that you forget how big you could actually be and how successful your business could be. And, you know, Nino Brown, he saw the big dream and the vision and he went for it. And that is really inspiring to me.
Okay. Once they consolidate operations at the Carter, their former partners, the mob, it's just a stereotypical mob guys hanging out at the supper club, watching sports, and this fucking guy, you know, they're doing all that mob stuff. Their front man, I think it was Frankie, he visits them at the Spotlight Club, and he's kind of like, hey, man, you know, we had a deal, you need to cut us in with our 10%, all that. Nino, recognizing his new capacity and seat of power, basically says, fuck that. We don't need you anymore.
Boom.
That's the way he puts it. The way I translate that a little bit. So when you're starting out, whether it's borrowing money or buying supplies or paying vendors, you're going to pay a lot more and you're going to have a lot less power in your hands when dealing with whether it's a bank, a vendor, a partner, customers, than when you grow. And when you grow to the point where you can take more of that in-house for yourself, and you also have the capacity to demand a better interest rate or better pricing on your products because you're ordering more or whatever, it's important for you to recognize that and take advantage of it. And that's exactly what Nino does when he tells Frankie to kick rocks, essentially. But yeah, so Nino, after they make this massive change in their operations and take a big chance and a big risk, and they've got some stuff going on, he goes, nah, it's time to renegotiate.
You have such an analytical mind, Jay. That's such a great. In the small business community, there's kind of this like support each other, and we definitely encourage people to support small businesses, but you do have to really dig into those costs of operating your business. And yeah, maybe somebody you like or know is selling something that, you know, you want or need, but if they're selling it for twice the price that you can get it from somebody else, you really have to weigh those options.
Sure. Cool. I like it. So I think one of my last main points is kind of the genesis of how things fall apart for the Cash Money Brothers. And it comes down to Nino not staying true to what got him where he was. And he recognizes that towards the end. He does, but he's in too deep and he's got to run. But in the beginning of the movie, he's talking to G Money, who's kind of his second and who ends up kind of helping things fall all apart towards the end. And he says, with all sincerity, nothing and no one will ever come between us. They're brothers. And then as things grow and grow and grow, Nino then begins to talk about how all of this is mine. I created all of this. The world is mine. And then, you know, some other, I won't get too deep in it because I don't really want to spoil the movie for anybody who hasn't seen it, but he does not stay true. So that kind of statement, and you know, there's another section where they're chanting out, "Am I my brother's keeper? Yes, I am." That's what holds his family, for lack of a better term, together. And when he begins to become more of a king than a leader, particularly when the Carter falls apart and he blames everybody in the room and says dismissively, "Leave me." That's really the beginning of the end of the entire thing. So
the loyalty is gone.
Yeah. So I don't doubt that the character meant what he said when they were all still on the come up, but when things were getting good, he betrayed that. And I think that, you know, many of us in small, our goal is to grow, of course. But if you grow to the point where you believe you did everything on your own, you know, you probably have loved ones who supported you when you first started out. Chances are pretty good you didn't just come up with a widget and start selling it like hotcakes. You know, your family was there with you at the vendor fair, helping you get set up when you were making no money. They were buying your products. Your friends were buying your products, and they were helping you and talking to you about what to do on social media or what's resonating and what's not. And at some point, you grow beyond those conversations, and you've got several employees and all this other stuff. But forgetting all of that, you know, if things go wrong and all of that burns down and you're back at square one, you might not be able to lean on that support system again.
That's a great point, especially coming off of what we just talked about. Nobody gets to a great amount of success by themselves. And you should go after what you want, and you should be, for lack of a better word, ruthless in reaching your goals.
Let's see. The other big quote that he says, I think it's only one time, but he said it's all business. It's never personal. And he doesn't really behave in a way that aligns with that statement.
And it's not true.
No, of course not. But he uses that statement as a way to justify a pretty brutal act. But it's not true to the way he behaves. So I guess the point there is, you know, what you say, particularly as a leader, what you say is being listened to, and the way you behave in comparison to what you say is absolutely being paid attention to. So consistency is important.
I keep flashing back to the part in the movie where they're at the wedding with Keith Sweat, which is my favorite part, and he uses the little girl as the human shield. And I keep thinking you're going to bring it up. Like waiting for you to bring up the part where he uses the kid as a human shield.
Stretch that pretty far to a self-preservation, but honestly, it's just his instinct.
Yeah.
To shield himself even at the expense of another life. And it really shows the depth. And that's the breaking point for his wife, who after that wedding tells him he's a monster, and he basically kicks her out. She gets out, luckily. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of all the points I really wanted to make about New Jack City and the Cash Money Brothers. It's a fictional, it's not real. It's fictional, but I think there was some parallels there to the way some small businesses are run.
I do too. I would say my overall takeaway was finding that balance of being true to yourself, going after what you want, and also the loyalty to the people in your personal life, but also your loyal customers, and keeping them happy and satisfied as well. And that, you can't 100% rely on somebody else, just like you can't 100% rely on yourself. Mm-hmm. So there's a balance when it comes to a small business. And if that balance tips too much either way, it could go up in flames.
Yep. So you want to wrap it up?
I had a lot of fun this week talking about pop culture businesses and how they could relate to our small businesses. If you guys listening have a fictional business that you would like for us to talk about on the podcast, you can find us on Instagram at More Gooder Ideas and on Facebook, the More Gooder Ideas podcast. And we hope you had fun going down memory lane with us and talking about New Jack City. If you're watching, Wesley Snipes, we love you. See you next week.
We don't love the whole cast?
We love you too, Ice-T, and Chris Rock, I guess, but mainly Wesley Snipes.
Chris Rock, you guess? Jesus.
Hot take. I know we're trying to wrap it up, but best Chris Rock performance, New Jack City. There's comedy, there's drama. He's crying, he's sick, he's healthy. It's phenomenal. So I'm not trying to.
Yeah, Pookie definitely, that character in that movie gets the raw end of everything.
Yes.
Like from the police side, from the Cash Money Brothers, Pookie is a doomed character from the start.
Nobody ever thinks about Chris Rock when they think about that movie, and he's really, really great in that. But Wesley Snipes, we love you. See you next week.
Oh, I get it now. This is a thing with Wesley Snipes is what this is.
Don't worry about what things I got going on with Wesley Snipes.
I mean, his name has come up an awful lot. I just wasn't sure.
I'm just a big fan, that's all.
So I would like to take us out with just, if you have not seen New Jack City, you need to see New Jack City. If you want to understand a little bit more about what us old codgers from the 1990s are all about, then you need to get yourself some culture, listen to some Queen Latifah, put on some Color Me Bad, get you a big gold hoop earring, and watch some New Jack City. So till next week, we're out.
See ya.
Thanks for checking out this episode of the More Gooder Podcast. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at More Gooder Ideas, and search us up on Facebook, the More Gooder Ideas Podcast. And don't forget to like and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode.